All right, welcome to my presentation on Lysander Spooner's The Constitution of No Authority. This guy apparently is supposed to be, is considered a left libertarian, even though honestly, from everything I've read of him, there's nothing left about him. He just thinks that, given time, wage labor will fall out of fashion, which I don't see as a left leaning thing. It's he very much understands that to have anarchism, you have to have no state, which all leftists don't understand. Now, he in his Constitution of No Authority, this is actually the third in a series of essays that he wrote in the mid-1800s, and this one is kind of the libertarian argument against the Constitution. He argues that if the Constitution were a contract, then it was between individuals who are long dead, and it cannot bind posterity, i.e. us, and that the American people today have never given their consent to be bound by the state prescribed by the Constitution. And a common retort to this would be, well, you express consent by voting. To that, he makes 10 points. He literally enumerates them. First, not everyone who's bound by the Constitution is allowed to vote. At the time, it was in the 1850s, so at the time, African Americans in most states, women, minors, etc. And this is still partially true today. And second, not everyone who is allowed to vote actually votes, and voting could only mean you support the government for the duration of the elected official's term. And so it can't be abstracted to kind of a rolling consent given by everyone who's bound by the Constitution. Third, voting could be done out of necessity due to circumstances imposed by others, not out of free volition. Fourth, a voter may prefer to not be taxed at all and may not be able to vote rather than, what did I say here? He may prefer to not be taxed at all and not be able to vote, rather than to be taxed and to be able to vote, but he was never asked. Fifth, what if you vote for the candidate who loses? Sixth, sometimes people vote simply out of protest. Seventh, secret voting means there's no way to tell whether someone consents. And eight, if a voter only finds an outcome in which their guys end up on top agreeable, then this consent is conditional, and so he cannot be said to consent to the situation as a whole. Ninth, if voting counts as assenting to something, why is it in secret? And how is it that the voters are not, or cannot be, responsible for the actions of the officers they elect? And 10th, the state is a secret band of robbers. Its existence, or the mechanisms by which it's perpetuated, voting, conflicts with the notion that voting means you support the Constitution. He goes on to make an interesting point about secret ballots. He thinks that ballots are really secret because voters are subconsciously aware that they should be ashamed, since deep down they understand that they are supporting a band of robbers to steal from and oppress their enemies. And so in summary, the Constitution derives zero authority from consent and is imposed on Americans involuntarily. And here's a good quote articulating this. And here we have what purports or professes or is claimed to be a contract, the Constitution, made 80 years ago by men who are now all dead and who never had any power to bind us, but which, it is claimed, has nevertheless bound 3 generations of men consisting of many millions, and which, it is claimed, will be binding upon all the millions that are to come, but which nobody ever signed, sealed, delivered, witnessed, or acknowledged, and which few persons, compared with the whole number that are claimed to be bound by it, have ever read or even seen or ever will read or see. And this is not much less true today, I don't think. Now, moving on from the specific narrow argument about the Constitution, he goes on to ask, who exactly is the government? Who are the people who are the government? Who are the state? Who compose the real governing power in the country? Who are the men, the responsible men, who rob us of our property, restrain us of our liberty, subject us to their arbitrary dominion, and devastate our homes and shoot us down by the hundreds of thousands if we resist? The answer to these questions is that only those who have the will and the power to shoot down their fellow men are the real rulers in this, as in all other so-called civilized countries. For by no others will civilized men be robbed or enslaved, which is pretty intuitive. The only people who would kill one another are the killers. And so it's yet further a priori reasoning for not fetishizing people in positions of power. And he also goes on to make interesting points about the Rothschilds. He says that the Rothschilds and that class of money lenders of whom they are representatives and agents, men who never think of lending a shilling to their next door neighbors for purposes of honest industry unless upon the most ample security and at the highest rate of interest, stand ready at all times to lend money in unlimited amounts to those robbers and murderers who call themselves governments, to be expended in shooting down those who do not submit quietly to being robbed and enslaved. I think that is a pretty spicy take, and I'm interested to hear what everyone else thinks. Thank you.